I had access to those archives of files, and of course I wanted to know, well, what have we found out? Now, I already had a very high security clearance. It was a period of unaccounted for time because I was like, well, it was called PRT records.
I guess I'm curious with the same question you've probably gotten your whole life about that first day in there, though. And you sit down at the desk, and now I assume, being the head of this desk, you're read in on, I'll say, a majority of the, let's say, intel they have on this kind of stuff. Did you just sit there for days and read through files and say, are fucking aliens real?
No, I mean, of course it was my first question. Whether it was articulated out loud or not, I don't know. But it was like we had a whole filing cabinet of files and many more at the Public Records Office and in our own internal archives. As I mentioned, there'd been a formal program looking at this since 1953, and we had some even older sightings that had occurred during the Second World War of so-called Foo Fighters. So, for example, Royal Air Force pilots in Bomber Command on missions over Germany and occupied Europe would occasionally encounter not just balls of light, but sometimes strange metallic craft, keeping track with their aircraft, not firing on them. And those sorts of reports went into the files. So we had files on this dating back to about 43.
God, why does everything happen World War II and on?
Yeah.
You know?
It may have happened before, but you can have an argument about when we really got a sort of global media set up in a way that it wasn't just so compartmentalized that one small town just read those small town stories or not. I don't know.
But you're saying that the pilots were describing, where my head's going with this. When they say small metallic object, I'm thinking very similarly to what we've seen with the Tic Tacs.
Yes.
From the Nimitz. Is it that kind of type thing? Not necessarily the same, but that's along the lines of what they were seeing?
Similar, yes. Yes, there are similarities for sure. And those old Bomber Command files, I've pointed at some researchers in that direction, and I think someone wrote an entire book on it. So there's some good information out there, and it's quite surprising. People have this view that they were all just balls of light, and which enables the skeptics to say, "Come on, it's a war zone. It's probably AAA and all of that." But it went further than that. It was in some occasions it was what looked like structured metallic craft, hundreds of feet in diameter.
Whoa, hundreds of feet.
Yeah. So, there was something going on. So yeah, that I had access to those archives of files, and of course I wanted to know, well, what have we found out about this? But going back to that point about my first day, actually in your first week, you actually shadowed your predecessor. So what happened was that I came in on the Monday morning. My predecessor was there, and so you put the two chairs at the one desk, and he's the one who briefs you, and you watch him in action. We had literally a hotline where the public could phone up and call in reports. We got some by letter as well. Some came in via military signal. This is all before.
Still, this is wild.
This is like, back in the day, you'd literally get mail. The clerical staff, the admin staff, would come in with the morning post, and it would come into your in tray, and you would open it up literally, and it would be, dear sir / madam, I am a retired Air Force officer, and I was out walking my dog last Tuesday when I saw this, and so it would happen like that. And so that first week I was shadowing my predecessor, and then the tradition was that increasingly he would hand over to you as the week went on. You would be expected to be more and more read in. You would be expected to be answering the correspondence, dealing with the calls yourself, And on the very last day, of course, you would work the morning, and then at lunchtime, my predecessor would have his farewell drinks, and you would give him a good send-off. And then that next Monday,
It's all you.
It's all you.
Now, are you getting extra security clearances and being, I guess, like double checked to be read in on extra stuff now because of the nature of this desk, or was it
Not
same old?
No, not because of the nature of the desk. Most, I would say 80, 90% of the work that we did on that desk was at unclassified level, which is kind of logical because a lot of it is taking those public reports and then investigating them with open source people like the Royal Greenwich Observatory. This is how you do an investigation, by the way.
Yes.
You get the data in relating to the sighting. When and where did it take place, and what's the description? And then you try and correlate that with something you either know about or can find out about. So you talk to the astronomers, you talk to the meteorologists, you talk to the radar people. If you've got a photo or video, you talk to the imagery analysis folks. Now, those would be within the intelligence community, so that does take you into classified work. Now, I already had a very high security clearance, as did my predecessor. Because
Even at a young age because of what you did, I guess.
because of
PDB, yeah.
actually because of the Gulf War. When I mentioned being seconded into the Joint Operations Center, you were literally seeing real-time information about Scud launches, for example. So you had access to satellite data. I probably can't say too much more about that, but I had what was at the time in the UK called positive vetting. Everyone has negative vetting to even be allowed through the front door. That's make sure you don't have a criminal record, make sure that there's nothing unusual on your finance side, like either large unexplained payments or financial problems that would render you vulnerable to blackmail.
Right.
Everyone gets that kind of basic background check. And I say basic for the Ministry of Defense. It's obviously quite advanced and complex. But for the jobs that involve a high level of access to top secret information, for example, on a semi-regular or regular basis, for that you need positive vetting. Nowadays in the US, you would call that a TSSCI clearance.
I've heard that.
Yes, top secret / sensitive compartmentalized information.
And what kinds of things are they looking for on that?
When you were being security vetted, anything and everything. They went back to your almost to your kindergarten. They would talk to every principal they would talk to your family, your friends, your teachers, your bank manager, anyone that you had worked with. Then and anything that didn't check out, they would grill you on relentlessly. Like, so for example, when I was about 15, 16, I did a summer job and I worked in an old people's home, doing the dishes, and I worked at a record warehouse, taking orders and putting them in a cart for shipment out. But that company had gone bust, and this was before the internet, and so it was a period of unaccounted for time because I was like, well, it was called PRT Records, and I know I don't have the address because it was through an employment agency, and these people came back to me 4 or 5 times because they couldn't nail it down. And
They
I was
thought
like,
you were a Soviet
I was
spy,
like,
man.
yeah, is any period of unaccounted for time, they think you're back at Moscow Central.
Right.
Being whatever. So I was like, well, maybe it was PTR Records and not PRT. And look, I don't know the number, but this is the street it was on. And then you would be called in for the dreaded final interview. And it was good cop, bad cop, only it was actually 2 bad cops.
Oh.
And they
They
were
using like circuit breakers.
they
on your
were not
nipples and
quite
everything?
like that. They didn't exactly waterboard us, and we didn't have to actually take because it's not legally admissible or usable in the UK. We didn't do a polygraph check or anything like that. Neither did we have random drug tests.
What do you mean it's not legally admissible?
Well, it's not in the British criminal justice system. I don't think you can use polygraph information.
Right, but that's different for a background check, right? I think it's the same here.
But the feeling was, look, if you can't use it in the criminal justice system, then surely that says something about its reliability, and we will rely on old-fashioned methods. And the old-fashioned methods were, like I say, going through every aspect of your background, talking to everyone that knows you, whether they're family, friends, colleagues, whoever it is. And then, as I say, the dreaded final interview. And these are usually retired cops, but senior cops who've investigated, detectives who've done like homicides and the most serious of crimes, who have interviewed hostile witnesses who are often quite smart, sort of people in organized crime. And the job of these people is to break you down, to try and find inconsistencies in your story, anything like that. And so this is the positive vetting process.
Doesn't sound very positive.
It's not very positive. Well, it's positive for them because they find people who aren't, being entirely truthful about things. And
you had that happen before the Gulf War, you were saying?
I had that to enable me to be seconded into. They didn't have enough people to do these 12-hour shifts on and off 24/7. So what they did is they took people who said, yeah, we can do it. And they wanted people at the younger end of the spectrum who had the energy to do like 7 12-hour shifts in a row. Then you would go home, come back and do another 12-hour shift, do that for a week. And then if you were doing day shifts, you'd take a break, go back to your normal duties, come back, and then you'd do nights. So they wanted people kind of in their 20s. They also wanted high flyers, and they wanted people who either had that positive vetting or were prepared to go through that process. And I said, yeah, bring it on. And because, of course, that opens up to you a much wider range of the more interesting jobs. So, of course, people with nothing to hide are like, yeah, I'll do that. And it's a little
UFO desk, let's go.
Yeah.